Hello and welcome to episode 2 of our 2023 NaPoWriMo series. I am your hostess with the mostest, Bex Sherwood, and I will be navigating us through the ponderous world of page poetry as we look today and explore our first challenge, which was page poetry. For the uninitiated, or if you're joining us for the first time, NaPoWriMo stands for National Poetry Writing Month, where poets around the world are challenged to produce 30 poems across 30 days in the month of April. We decided not to do that because 30 is a lot of poems, and instead have set ourselves a 5-week challenge where we have a different poetry themed challenge for each of the 5 weeks. Last week we launched our series. You can go and check out that episode. The link is below for episode 1, and we set our first challenge of page poetry. But it's not just myself that are going through and pouring through the pages. I am joined today by Kevin Mclean, Katie Ailes, and Mark Gallie. Woo!
Hello.
Hello.
What's up?
So we're really excited to be part of the series. It is now officially April, which means we are no longer the early birds. That worm is fully grasped and gone. Now it is definitely into the thick of it. If you are writing poems this month, please do tag us, share us. Our writing club are really getting involved over on our Discord, so feel free to join our Patreon, have a little investigate. You can join our Discord and complain about NaPoWriMo alongside the rest of us. So yeah, how's everyone doing? How did you enjoy week 1, first challenge, page poetry?
No.
That's the end of the episode, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be
that's my personal
elaborate.
individual answer. Yeah. I think I struggle a bit with page poetry because I fundamentally got lost in the concept of it can in that idea of it can only be on the page, right, or on the screen, or visual, I guess, predominantly in nature. And so I got sort of lost in what can that be. I had a bunch of ideas that I thought were really cool, but were they're it seemed like entirely too much work. I'll be completely honest. I was like, that's a great idea. That seems like that would be really difficult. And we got a bunch. If I had the whole month, I think I could have probably come out with something I was happy with. But instead, I went with a bit more, I don't know, a bit more traditional. I didn't want to do a form we'd already done because I was I felt page poetry just was lending to concrete, and I did a concrete poem previous year, that I quite liked, and so I didn't want to do that one again, and all that kind of came sort of to nothing because I ended up doing a form I've already done before. So
that's totally fair. I mean, also it's totally valid. I mean, it's not like Edwin Morgan had one concrete poem.
No,
you know what I mean?
it's
Just because
very
you've
true.
done something in that form before.
At least 2.
Yeah. I mean, like the burn stanza. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like he was limited to it one time. So you can re-explore those previous.
It's a thing I used to really beat myself up for. Like when I first started writing poetry, was like the idea of every poem has to be about something different, and it has to sound totally different, and has to use totally different imagery. And you're like, I've seen Andrea Gibson live, and the amount of times they bring up the moon, and they're like one of the best poets I've ever seen. It is fine to delve into themes and allow them to come out. And I mean, for example, cows. But I think people are put off by it, right? You feel like, oh, I've done this form, I've done this thing. Whereas the more you do it, I know Jacqueline Safra writes just endless sonnets and still finds kind of new stuff in them every time. We were talking to Joelle Taylor about this, about the idea of writing in form and kind of using the same forms, and how it can actually push you to see something new, that sort of containment. So yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing to do that.
No, and I guess that's kind of is my lesson 1 from our getting the lessons in early of don't learn from my mistakes. Learn from my mistakes.
Don't learn from your mistakes.
Learn from my mistakes. Learn from my mistakes. Whichever one you want.
Suffer too.
No, but I guess it's that. Yeah, getting don't you can get easy to get bogged down in the idea, the concept, and I know I struggle with that idea of I've done that before, or that's quite similar, and so I feel like I'm being very unoriginal, even though I'm you're doing the thing. It's go with the thing. Yeah. I did eventually settle on something that is still different than a thing that I've done, because that's what I thought. What the spirit of NaPoWriMo to be challenging myself, and that was kind of the idea of new and shiny, which is not necessary. Sometimes it's just as challenging to go to what you already know and make that.
The spirit of NaPoWriMo, Charles Dickens' less mentioned ghost.
Yeah, the fourth gender. Well, that sounds great, Mark. I'm very curious. So why don't you kick us off, and then we'll get to how everyone else's page poetry experiences.
Yeah,
in the right
Kev
way.
looks
Oh, the fear. I thought there'd be preamble. Oh no!
No preamble.
Straight in. I've opened the book, and upon a page there is.
Upon a page there is. So what I'm going to do, for the benefit of the viewers, is we've done it around page poetry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just read it to you, because that's the thing, right? Because if it doesn't work just being read to you, but it does work when we add the imagery required. Something. Step 3 ? So yeah, I'll read it, then it will be shown, and then I'll tell you what I've done, because I think that's the more, I don't know, annoying, maybe intriguing way.
Sounds very exciting.
Cool.
Mark.
So I'm gonna go for go for this. So, alrighty. Down a little stream, then up a steep hill, you see it, if only from far away, out of the corner of your eye. You notice its stillness first. It is hunched over, head in its hands. There are those that wander this wilderness, find nature comforting for reading, relaxing, and thinking. A less curious person might leave this entity in peace, but empathy implores long before you hear the crying. Then, as you get closer, its demeanor changes. It seems to be calming down already. It stops sobbing and stands, 4 feet too tall. You remember your mother's message. Be home before it gets late. And so that's the reading of the poem. Creepy. And so
it's very creepy, pretty terrifying.
And now
I'm trying to count pentameter in my head and be like, what form is this?
So yeah, that's the
words.
a crazy big-brained person might be able to figure it out, but I wouldn't imagine so without knowing it beforehand. Weirdly, because you don't know how the lines are written. So image appear.
Ha!
Amazing. So that's the image.
Disturbing as the poem. Good.
Okay.
Good
oh yeah. So I want the image to be sort of disturbing. And so now to tell you what I've done. I mean, does anyone want to have a quick fire guess, a quick look at it? There are 2 correct answers, because there is technically 2 forms in here.
There's something about
this
that.
Acrostic?
So it is an acrostic. An acrostic is the first part.
Okay.
Who says don't read it.
And then it's also a kind of golden shovel-y.
Yes. So it is also golden shovel in the form of the end words, then make up a message. So reading it's just a creepy story.
It is. That it certainly is.
If you were of a mind, if you looked at it and read the first letters first, it would tell you what to do. But if you've made it to the end,
it's too late.
It's too late. Sadly.
That is very clever.
Poem that is The Ring.
Well, kind of. For those, and for credit for the artist, I couldn't find an individual artist credit for the image I've used in the background, but that is credited to the online sort of writing community that I think I've mentioned this before, the SCP Foundation. So that's specifically sort of the inspiration of the piece is a thing that once you see it, that's all you need to do for it to be. Once you've seen it, it cries and then it gets you. So kind of trying to relay that idea across. So I was like, it's golden shovel and that's the thing, but in the sort of thing, it's sort of it was an interesting challenge to have. I know what I wanted to do at the end.
Yeah.
And so what I had at the start, and then sort of filling in the middle.
Yeah, that's crazy, because obviously lots of people write bookend their poem and then fill out the middle, but you literally had to do that with every single line.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
For it to have so much flow with that restriction is very impressive. It is the most effort anyone has ever put into a forward chain email. So thanks for that.
Yeah. It is 100% that kind of if you don't forward this to 15 more people, then Shy Guy, which is what he's called, will come and get you.
If you don't share a link to this podcast episode on Twitter to all your pals.
Say NaPoWriMo 3 times in the mirror and
Mark
all appear covered in blood.
That's
yeah.
cool though, Mark. I like that.
really,
So
really
while
cool.
I guess I a bit beat it down that I felt it was, you know, because that's what I mean is I didn't want to do concrete because I felt I'd done it before and then did golden shovel, but with an extra bit. Well, I do like I think I like the concept of it, of a thing. I think that could be quite fun as well. I don't know whether the story in the middle, I think I could probably do that same start and end and have a bunch of different things in the middle ground, which would be interesting.
I really like the shape of the poem. I don't know if that's a thing, but like the length of it is perfect because it feels like a scroll stretched out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's or like film reel or something. Like you know, it's got that. The fact that it works so well, the acrostic and the golden shovel together, and everything feels kind of laid in between it. There's something really nice once you know that about the shape.
I mean, the fact that you haven't, I was just going to say the fact that you haven't center justified it, but you've done the stretch justify. So you have lines like, as you get closer, it's,
which I love.
Unintentional.
Well.
It wrote the thing, and then I knew I wanted to have this kind of layout because I wanted to have obviously obvious for the acrostic and sort of for the golden shovel. But those lines doing that stretch, I was like, ooh, that's a fun extra thing that happened to happen. So yeah.
It's great. It looks really cool as well. Like what an exciting new form, this amalgamation. Guess what, we're in fusions now.
Across a shovel.
Across the shovel.
That is pretty abysmal.
A dirty shovel.
Well,
because it's kind of muddy, right? Not dirty. A
grubby shovel rather than a
grubby shovel.
Grubby shovel.
Yes, a grubby shovel.
Okay,
but then that's where you get into like the idea of, you know, like we're spoken word artists, right? And it's like the thing we always talk about so often. It comes up and people think it just means not giving a crap about form, the free form.
Yeah.
Like playing with form is fun. Like this idea that, well, that's what a villanelle is, and thou shalt never change it. It's like bending form and playing with form and bringing in new bits and like refreshing it is like such a fun thing to do. So yeah, like screw the rules.
Screw the rules.
And bear that in mind when we get to my stuff.
That's the
Screw
episode title.
What a segue, Kevin.
Yeah, you
which rules are we screwing now?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because last week you were not the best pleased about us looking at page, I'm putting it very politely, you were not pleased at all about it being page poetry. How do you now feel, right, having done it? Come on, turn this into a therapy session, Kev. Tell me, spill the tea.
I was not pleased. Like page poetry. It's not that I don't like page poetry. I don't read poetry, so that's the first barrier in that particular challenge. I watch a lot of poetry. Like I watch a lot of videos online and stuff, and like I like a lot of, you know, page poets, but I like to see them read. And so like form and stuff is something I've learned more about. So it was just kind of off-putting, like just like a knee-jerk reaction. But like actually, I'm very pleased with what I put together.
Nice.
But I have made a bit of a fundamental mistake.
Okay.
So when I thought page poem, because I'm a simple guy, I kind of thought very much literally of like, you require a piece of paper for the poem.
Okay, cool.
But then what I accidentally did was write a performance poem that a piece of paper is essential to, that will not work even remotely well, like on a page in a book. Like it would work terribly.
I would still say that is, so from our understanding, last week in the poetry cupboard was from what I gathered, what we were defining as page poem is where a poem that without the paper, the poem either would not work or would be fundamentally different. We did not say it needed to be publishable or you know, it's got to be in size 10 point with a double spacing ready for submission. Like that was not the
said
challenge. So I think that's perfectly valid.
Element without, so as long as it has some sort of like.
Oh, it's visual. Okay, great. So I will show you the image of it on a singular page. Okay, so this is the image of the poem. So some of you will recognize.
Nostalgia hit me like a ton of bricks.
That's what I was going to say. Some people will recognize this immediately. And actually, what I've done, to be fair, is I've overachieved. I have written 32 individual poems.
That's a lot of poems.
That
So what I'm going to do is, so you've seen the image. That is the image as laid out on a page. But a better way to visualize the poem is with this.
I love this. The thing is, as well, is I know you don't like props in poetry, so I'm really glad you gave yourself a prop too.
Yeah.
That's sick. Okay,
so
great.
This is my little. Some people call it a fortune teller. Some people call it a chatterbox. Katie calls
it a cootie catcher.
There we go.
Never heard that. Very American. Great.
But this is a thing everyone should probably recognize from school. People would do these constantly, and there's a kind of rhythm to it and move to it. So what I thought I would do is do an individual poem for each of you. And so we would get to experience.
I'm glad I went first.
So we will start with our host with the most.
Great.
Bex Sherwood, would you like to pick a color? Red, yellow, blue, or green?
I'm going to pick red because I know red's your favorite color.
R-E-D. Would you like to pick a number between 1 and 4?
3.
1, 2, 3. Would you like to pick a number between 5 and 8?
Let's go for 5.
So you have red and 5. Okay.
Well, red 3 and 5, but I don't know what that is.
The way it works.
Okay, cool.
Raising money on Red Nose Day, we always did our best, returned to tattered classrooms and hoped to pass the test. Does it stay with you forever? Does it decide what you'll become? Do the parts that built you truly add up to the sum?
Oh, this is really cool.
Katie, do you wanna go? Red, yellow, blue, or green? I mean, I would suggest you don't pick red again because
I'll go blue.
B-L-U-E. Between 5 and 8.
8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Between 5 and 8.
8 again.
So blue and 8. Okay. This is why I hate props. Oh, no, it's fine. No grey skies when I think back, just bright and brilliant blue. The lie of rain, a trick they use to trap us in classrooms. We should hope for better days for all those who come next, and we should apologize for the problems left to fix. Gallie?
Yellow.
Well,
how much I want the yellow.
Too excited. Y-E-L-L-O-W. Between 5 and 8.
I'll go 7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Should give me
and between
4.
1 and 4.
Yes,
so you are yellow 4.
I'm
yellow
picking my
4.
fate. I knew which number I wanted.
Yeah, so yellow. Yellow walls of peeling paint that once were white and clean. They'd rather it all turn to dust than let you dare to dream. Do we ever truly leave the kids we were back then? Do we ever truly learn, or do we all still play pretend? And so it is a series of, they're all rhyming couplets. All the first ones include the color that is on the front. And all the second, I mean, so the outside is kind of like when you're at school, and then the inside is kind of like after, reflecting.
Yeah.
And so there are 32 potential poems, all with 8 lines.
This is
so
cool, Kev. Like, honestly, super great and clever to give it that like nostalgic school theme as well, because it does ring so with the prop, it does ring so true of that like time and that kind of idea that, you know, I don't know what other people had in their fortune tellers, but we had the colors and then we had numbers, and then we had names of people. It was just like guys' names or girls' names or whatever, and then you were gonna marry Jessica, man, right, and all of that, and that was like the standard. And to think of it so as like, you know, this is your now, right? This is the outside is your now, and the inside is what could be inside of you following the now. Like, super profound for a fucking fortune teller. Like, amazing, just so good. I am very impressed. That is a great. That is a strong start.
I should give a shout out because I have very few skills. So the actual thing was made by the wonderful Katie Ailes. Put it together for me, because no one thought for a second
so
I made this or that this was
very
my handwriting.
precise. I did.
The best part was Kev came up to me yesterday and he's like, "Oh, I need a chatterbox. Like, do you know how to make a chatterbox?" I was like, "I don't know what that is." And didn't you say you had to Google what it was for ages because you
I had to
couldn't remember the
Google
name of it?
kids paper game number color
Ah.
hand thing.
Picker.
Because I knew it,
Yeah.
because where I'm from, it was like, it was a fortune teller. It was like,
Yeah.
it was read your fortune, and it was that. And so it wasn't necessarily names. It was like, it would be along those same variants, you know, like,
Yeah.
oh, the girl, you know, the person you like is going to notice you soon.
Yeah.
Or like,
Yeah.
alternative, there'd always be a couple that are just like, no one likes you. Like, you know, like, there's always a couple of mean ones.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you,
I
I hope I
predict
don't
you're
know them
about to
all.
be
Yeah.
kicked in the balls, right? And then as soon as you get it, they fucking hit you.
Absolutely. Active, you know, forget
But
your
I thought it'd
passive
be a
School
cool
days,
thing.
best days of your life.
I thought it'd be a cool thing, like that's a thing anyone can make, right? Like it's so, like mine is very specific, and I like the image of it actually as like a kind of abstract piece where you're like, oh, I don't know how to read this, and it's only in the removal of the page and the act of making it something. So it kind of fit my sensibilities, right? Of like it is integrity, it is written down. Like it would be very difficult for me to just read. I would just have to read the first 4 couplets followed by another 8 couplets, which isn't a very interesting way to do it.
A lot of the.
So like the idea that to have the paper object itself is to have all these potential poems was kind of a cool thing. But I was like, it'd be nice to have like, oh, you have it written down that way, but maybe on like another sheet is like one you could tear out and make yourself or something to like fill it in. Because I would love to see other people's
pre-made cootie catchers that you could then, you could
so
tear out
because I'd love to see other people's like what they do with that object.
It's a great template for a workshop too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like give different prompts and try out different things, like whether it's colors on the outside.
You could pick like, you could put forms on the outside and then a theme in the middle and get everyone to pick a form from the outside. You go through and then they get, okay, you're going to be writing a sonnet because you picked sonnet on whatever. That's a cool thing.
I'm using that. That's
copyright.
Such a
Write
cool
that down.
idea.
No one else can use that. That's ours. That's ours.
Yeah,
really ready.
It was nice because I mean,
so
I love rhyming couplets. Like I think it's just a really nice kind of sing-songy way to start. And it's not, I wasn't strict on myself, but it's a kind of like you know, that's I think it's like 6 syllables, 7, 6, 7.
Yeah.
And like some of them don't fit that exactly, but there's a nice rhythm to it and stuff. And I like that kind of it's how all my poems end. So it's like it was very easy for me to do. And it wasn't easy for me to do, but that kind of writing of the sort of 8 inside couplets was surprisingly like just kind of bum 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 because it's my brain kind of works in that cadence. So yeah, it's good. So actually, I'm really chuffed with my.
It's great. We have a grub. We're gonna call it a grubby shovel.
Grubby shovel.
And let's go for like a poem picker or something rather than a fortune teller.
Yeah.
So those
it is a poem picker. You're picking your
2
poem.
brand new forms just for you.
Canto catcher.
Oh, that's a good one. I like it. Write that down. Copyright Loud Poets.
Respect to you in the audience if you also just went ooh with us.
It doesn't take a lot to make us wildly impressed, and it's Canto Catcher and Grubby Shovel. We're like, boss. Sweet. Katie, do you have a new form for us, or would you rather me go next? What's your preference?
Right. I've either invented a new form or wholesale plagiarized it off of someone.
Perfect.
So I should explain.
Invested.
I've had an idea for ever since we set the prompt for page poetry of this poem in my mind that I have seen somewhere that is very similar to the poem that I ended up writing. The problem is I have very vivid dreams that are often bureaucratic and related to work that I need to do. Like I'll have dreams that I'm sending important emails and I assume that I've sent them and then I haven't actually. So it is entirely possible that I dreamed this form and it doesn't exist. I don't know. So viewer, if as I'm explaining this, you're like, I wrote that, Katie, that's not yours. Please tell me because I don't want to plagiarize.
Yeah, get in touch, Gwendolyn Brooks.
Yeah, right.
Talking about
Shakespeare's ghost rises from the dead and is like, bitch, please. That's mine. But yeah, I would love to know if anyone else has done this. Yeah. So I have, kind of created a form. I think that the best way of doing it is for me to show you what I guess read out and show you what I wrote and then kind of backtrack to explain the process behind it. So I will do that. 7 questions and 7 true answers, not necessarily in the correct order. What were you given? My parents' fiercest hopes. What made you a strong woman? What do you love most of all? Tight, enclosed spaces. Where do you feel safe? Failure. What are you afraid of? His eyes. What is the last thing you want to see? A shining golden ring. What have you become? Cicadas in summer. So basically, the way that what I did is I wrote out 7 questions. So those are the 7 questions I read. And I wrote out next to them true answers, how I would genuinely answer those questions. And then I've jumbled up the answers. So within that poem, there is truth, but the reader is invited to find the truth, or to find a truth that feels like their truth, or in whatever way to kind of create the poem by matching the questions to the answers, almost like, and sort of going with the theme of Kev's like childhood activities, like when you would get questions and answers in tests at school and you would have to draw a line between the question and the right answer, like that, but in poem form.
This
So
is super
that's what I
cool.
did.
Great.
This is very. I
So
love.
much.
And
I'm just staring at all the answers.
Yeah,
like-
I love the puzzles of how we've thought page poetry, and puzzles
Yeah,
and
puzzles.
things have been apparently fairly prevalent. I really like this. I think this is very cool because I think, because they're not necessarily in the correct order is very clever, because I also like the sort of story you tell with the questions in that order.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily obviously need to be. I'm not grammatically educated enough to know whether grammatically you tell us whether it's just the answers or both, or whether it's erroneous by the title.
Absolutely, yeah. The order of the questions is suggestive in itself, and so if you rearrange those, yeah,
it's kind of a really interesting take on like list poems, which is something that we've discussed.
yes,
before.
exactly, yeah.
It's like it's also kind of contrapuntal, because you're telling us the lines are there, but we don't know what lines. You don't know whether like it is sort of 2 poems depending on which order you would put like 1, 2 across. I
really like the idea of all the lines going into one answer.
Yeah, that as well.
You know what I mean?
Also,
like that as a kind of visual would be very nice, of like, know, none of these, just this one. That's again, a good like workshop exercise, right? You could give a list of questions and be like, okay, give your answers. And then that's your first poem, right? So like, what were you given? Say the top one is correct, right? But then you go, okay, now you need to change what answer applies to what question. Yeah. And that's your poem. Yeah. Like that's a cool idea. Like that's a lot of fun.
So what I've done actually for folks watching and for you guys, like I kind of, because I tried this in a bunch of different ways, and I'm going to keep experimenting with it because I think it's a really interesting idea. And my hope is that it's interesting beyond just being a cool workshop prompt to kind of generate ideas, but that I get some cool new poems out of it. But what I've done is in the description below, you'll find a link to a Google Doc, which is like a template to make your own. So if you are interested, you can find that. And I've filled it in as an example with my own poem. But some of the things that came up for me were like, okay, as I'm writing answers, how can I make answers that could also work for some of the other questions? So like, my parents' fiercest hopes works for what made you, like I came out of that, but then also what have you become? Like I've become what my parents hoped for, or something like that. Something like his eyes can be, what do you love most of all? His eyes. What are you afraid of? His eyes. Like it works in a different way. So that was one thing that I found really interesting in it. And then there's so many other possibilities. Like you could add in yes no questions, which
Yeah.
would be really cool. You could also try jumbling the order of the questions. You could do any number of cool things. And
I mean, you could even display it with the actual answers next to the questions, but because you have said not necessarily in the correct order, it allows for that. I mean, that was the thing we were talking about with page poetry, is being that because in a performance it's contained to that time frame, right? That's the 3 minutes that poet is sharing that poem on stage, maybe the only time that you hear that poem done in that way, whatever, but could be the only time you hear that poem ever, right? And with a page poem, when it is written down physically, you do have more time to examine and absorb, and I'm sure that's of interest to like a whole bunch of people who read poetry, to like find those hidden meanings. And like this is one that, in like, I mean this in the most complimentary way, that I could totally see going into like a school curriculum analyzing poetry. You know what I mean? Like there is so much that could be, you know, is she afraid of his eyes, or is the eyes the favorite thing? Here's an essay exploring whatever, you know. And I think it's like,
but
such a great, it's with how little words there is so much there, and that is really impressive.
We often talk in poetry of like the best poems are general enough or personal enough to believe the author believes it, to see the passion, the importance, the emotion, but general enough that you can lay your own stuff over it. And I think this is like such a distilled version of that. And you know, when we get into ideas of like death of the author and like where certain lines, what they mean, and like you're never right, you're always wrong, because you're not in the moment the poet wrote it. And so it is always your inference, it is always your bias that informs your perception of the line, right? No matter how many people analyze it the same way, you don't know what the poet meant. You never will unless they say that. And so like in this kind of thing, it takes that to like the nth degree of going like that jumbled order. Because when we, you know, I'm talking about the potential, and because a lot of what we do is like the workshop idea, and because I see this and immediately want to do one of my own. So I'm like, oh, you could do a template and you could mix up, and they could either use yours and you could input their own, or but as like a presentation piece of like, here is my answer to that. And like that, it's where a tagline becomes important. Like that line at the top is integral to the piece. That is part of the poem.
Without that, you're like,
that's the unreliable narrator. It's the seed of doubt in the piece that makes you go, oh, well, maybe his eyes aren't what she loves, maybe it's what she fears. And like all that stuff that lays into it is so, like Bex said, to use so little wording or vocabulary and put so much implication into it is like, and so many possible permutations of that implication.
Because I was going to say, because there's a similar idea, obviously executed differently between obviously Kate's and Kev's, the idea that, you know, it's like the deck of that many combinations of a deck of cards, right? It's like you say, it's like it's less words, but the combinations and then the stories or spirals that can come out of that, you know, you're like, are you written 32 poems rather than the thing? And like, so it's more,
you could end up doing like you got the 7 lines, right? And you take the 7 poems, turn those into the end line of however many sonnets or whatever, you know what I mean? Like there's this like drop funnel of, I had an idea for a show years and years ago, and I think like the more we do these things, the more I'm like, oh, I actually could do this, which was, what if you had a show that was someone attempting to draft a poem, a love poem, a letter, the perfect poem, and every poem in the show was a draft of that piece. And so the final poem doesn't contain a word or phrase that hasn't appeared in the show throughout it.
A big found poem from other love poet. You know, this is not the greatest song in the world. This is just a tribute kind of vibes.
And like, there's a great one where you could put that in and then pull some of those random lines out, even ones that weren't in particular combination in the initial draft version of it, that like that come out later. Like the more I think about it, I come back to that idea as being interesting.
I had fun as well. Just briefly, one of the things that I found really fun about it was thinking about how to almost like trick the reader, like how to be like, okay, I've hidden a truth in here, but how can I make it harder for the reader to find it? So things like, where do you feel safe? My genuine answer is tight enclosed spaces, because I'm whatever the opposite of a claustrophobic is. Like, this is where I
Agoraphobic.
spend most of my time. No, I like wide open spaces. I just really also love tight enclosed spaces,
Weird.
and I feel safe in
Yeah.
them. Anyway. So having that for where do you feel safe, I think most people would assume that would be the answer to what are you afraid of, because it's a typical fear. And so playing off of that and then just trying to almost have it be an attempt to stymie them from finding the truth, which of course for me, I'm really interested in what is truth and
Yeah.
blah blah blah. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with this. Please do, guys, like check out the Google Doc below and let me know if you've heard of this or if you try it out, because this is a brand new idea for me, and I would
And if
love
it is
to hear other
new,
people's
we
thoughts.
need to name this
We do need to
form.
know.
Yeah, TM trademark. Oh, that is yeah.
So we got what?
Katie
We got
Ailes and
like-
the 7 lies.
Puzzle, 7 deadly questions, the puzzle poetry, pending
Mi-
titles.
mix and Matt. No, yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll
Put it
have
in the comments, lads.
got
if
any
you've got
ideas?
anything
What
better.
Let us
even
know.
is
Regardless,
poetry?
trademark. Sweet.
Bex.
Yeah. So
Mm.
I have done. I did such a good job writing a page poem. I literally can't share it with you all by speed. It only works as a page poem. So I can't read a poem, which is really annoying because my aim going into this NaPoWriMo was to have more pieces for performance, but this is fully visual. And it's kind of interesting that everyone else has played with these like puzzles and these the visual meanings. Because what I decided to do was to do word puzzles. Originally, I was going to do a word search, and I was going to make it a concrete poem. So you would uncover the words, and it would lead to an image on the page, and it would relate to like a longer term poem. But I couldn't work out how to do the order, and there was all these other complications. So I decided to do the most complicated thing that I possibly could, and I have made a crossword poem. So here is my crossword. You can see it here. There's like a lot.
I want it on record just before you get into it that I was like, crossword would be a good idea. Entirely too much work to do.
Yeah.
So I wrote this up as too much work. So bravo.
Yeah. So here my cross on the screen. We may do a quick musical interlude because there are 4 different pages I need to show. Great, there we go. So first of all, there's obviously the crossword puzzle. You know what that looks like. I don't need to explain that any further. Each of those is numbered. And then I also have the structure of the poem, which I've named Find the Words very aptly for this. And there are 2 versions of this, one with the blank spaces, with the intention that as you complete the crossword you can fill it out. And I also have a listing as well, which has like as I A87 with an A70 and D43 to D73. As you see, I can't share that poem. It's
you absolutely could. I would listen to that poem.
And also there is a full page of clues to help you find the words that I was intending in this poem. So if you've got some spare time and you want to do a ridiculously long crossword and find out what my poem was, you can do so. But it was really
you
fun.
haven't even used black squares in the crossword. That's insane, Bex.
What do you mean? No, there isn't any. There will be one update to the find the words puzzle, just with I'm going to put the amount of letters for each of the words at the end of the clue. So that will be there by the time you're all seeing it. It will be there, but it's not as of the time of us all looking at it. Yeah, so there's like a whole bunch of clues. Some of the words that are later on in the crossword are words earlier in the crossword. The poem rhymes, so that should give you an indicator of if you have correctly filled it out. If it doesn't rhyme at the end. yeah,
You're
so
Oh my
beautifully
days.
insane in the very best way. How long did this take you?
so I there is an app for everything online. I got assistance in making the fucking actual thing of the crossword. But yeah, because I had the idea and then I had to figure out how to do it. So then I wrote the poem and then I went through and I made clues for all the words I wanted to clue in the poem. And then I got this generated and then I had to write all of the clues up with the right order, and then I had to write the draft of the poem that had the clues in it. So A is across and D is down, so it's like A70, D, whatever, and that's to feed into making it yourself. So this is one that thinking of page poems, it really only works in this visual format. I could read the poem, but it would kind of ruin
It would
the
give the
surprise.
Yeah,
We have to do it.
Problem.
Next week on the podcast, we all need to come back with our completed version of
I mean,
Bex's
to be
poem.
fair, when I made it as well, and looking at the actual puzzle template that I have of Find the Words, I also think that makes a pretty dope page poem on its own without the crossword attachments, where I just went, okay, cool, here is this blanket poem. Here's the format of it. Here's a few conjoining words, and you populate that with whatever you want.
That was the first
and I was
idea I
like,
had,
Mad
a sort of
Libs.
Mad Libs
Yeah,
version of
yeah.
it. I shared a Twitter post on our Discord, on the writing group Discord, which was that, like, they do it for, it was a very simplified
It's like,
version.
yeah,
like,
I see it a lot for like
yeah.
poetry within schools and stuff. Like that's a thing that's done. So I mean, it's a good thing that I had this after I'd already done the effort of the crossword. Otherwise, I probably would have stopped. But yeah, I really wanted to lean into the needing of the page. I really wanted to lean into it being a very like interactive piece that felt very like it's not directly personal, whatever, but it is like a kind of experience, it's a lot of there's like 80 odd words in there that you got to figure out, and like a whole bunch of them are going to be like specific ing or ed, and you've got to like think of it in the context of like the wider poem and all of that. So I'm really interested to see if anyone gets it right. I'm sure I have misspelt something somewhere. The amount of proof checking I did of this poem is really crazy, and it did take a long time. But I loved it. I thought I was like, I really have never seen anything like this in this way.
That's so
And that was
cool.
the vibe. So this is my 4 pages of 1-page poem. Basically, I wrote a shitty rhyming poem and needed to make it better with gimmick. No.
When in doubt, add crossword.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote a bunch of questions and answers and scrambled them up on a table.
So you're so smart. Yours is so like simple compared to this convoluted shit.
I do love that we've created the Loud Poets puzzle book.
Yeah,
I'm so keen. I'm amazed. It's great. I can't wait. Maybe pending soon. Yeah.
Well, with added creepiness from Gallie.
Yeah.
The dark 13th chapter of the puzzle book.
Yeah, you get to the last book and Samara crawls out.
Prophecy.
Children love horror. It's a puzzle book.
Not fun, scary, Mark. It's just scary.
I'm sure I could write something not scary.
Maybe next week.
Challenge.
Maybe next week. I don't know.
We'll see.
I will just reaffirm that I am very glad I did go first, given.
I really like yours.
I don't mean that to
be. Did such different stuff.
Down on mine. I have very much enjoyed that progression. Like mine's easy, like the gold shovel acrostic. The rest of you goes. So what is it? You're like, well,
Yeah. I did kind of realize
puzzle book stuff, and then Gallie went, "Here's my nightmare," and like that is a weird.
Does kind of change the dynamic.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm sorry there's no poem to critique, I guess. I mean, maybe I'll give it a week and I might share it the top of next week.
That sounds good.
Or maybe in our wrap-up episode or something.
Do your version and then we'll hear the answers from
you know what? No, this can be an end of the series thing so that people have got time, because it's a big fucking crossword. So people have got time to do it and stuff. But yeah, I will include, there is a Dropbox that will or a link or whatever that will have Katie's info about doing her 7-11 poem. I don't know. We're going to need a better, I don't know what name we're going to call it. We'll think of something. But Katie's
Let's not
for
go with
advice on
7-Eleven.
Katie. No, it's bad. So yeah, Katie's and also access to mine. So if you want,
Hey, I'll
crossword
put
itself.
mine up there with all the couplets, so you can
Great.
see what all the
Oh,
8 inside and
all
4
of our
outside.
poems will be accessible for download in this folder. Mark, I'm just throwing yours in as well.
Oh yeah, they've seen it.
Complete the set.
If they've watched this, they know not to read it, hopefully.
That's true. Billy. That's the thing, you
That
heard
ship
it. You
has
got
sailed.
warned in advance.
Put it in its own folder.
Yeah. It's a separate cursed
Cursed.
folder. The font's all fucked up.
Puzzle book folder of nightmares.
Doom. Yeah, so we will share that. I would love it if you had the time and the inclination to do my crossword poem. That would make me so very, very happy. It was really fun to do in a very stupid, challenging way, where I had to think of I was like, how do I describe this word in a way that's not too vague, but also not too specific, and like
Coming up with the clues is like the hardest.
That really took me, I would say, because I had the idea and then I had to work out how to kind of facilitate it, and then I wrote the poem, right? And that was like step 3 of completing this poem, right? Was finishing the whole fucking poem, and then I went, okay, what of these words make the most interest? Because at first I was going to do the whole poem like that, and I was like, you can't have and with a million times in this crossword. It's going to completely destroy it, right? So there needs to be like some semblance of in-betweeny bits and commas and whatever to give it a little structure. So I picked kind of the best words that I felt were the most interesting or the longest or whatever. Found various, I used like 8 different softwares to try and build this crossword, and loads of them didn't work, or like came up with lots of smaller crosswords that then I was like, well, how do I differentiate which clue from which crossword is related to which verse in the thing? So yeah, it did take me longer than I care to admit. I would really recommend it as like a good fun thing, though. If anyone is interested in making one, hit me up and I will like link you to it's a free software that I used, so I can link to it if anyone is interested to do this madness. But yeah, hopefully it has everything you need. I want to see some puzzle poems if you do fancy doing it. Yeah, so
Chaos.
that's
Week 1, and we've all lost our minds.
we got to stretch out
This
this
is
start. We got like all of April
this
to
is
go.
a really strong first week, guys.
And we also have a name for your form, which is the BFC, the big fucking crossword.
Crossword. I like that a lot.
Get yourself a BFC.
So the Loud Poet Nightmare Puzzle Book, pending, will be coming out later on this year. No, maybe. Well, maybe, who knows? Probably not. But yeah, so that we fully are closing the chapter on page poetry. Thank you, everyone, for completing your page poems and sharing them with us today. I say that like you all had a choice. We would shame you should you not have brought a poem to share.
Going down week 1 would be tragic.
Yeah. So well done, everyone. So now I think it's time. We've got a little bit of time. We're going to talk about next week, what is to come. And we're going to talk about something that we're kind of known for a little bit, or maybe it's more historically.
Being hot.
I'll leave. But that's not a challenge, right? That's just a way of life. But our next challenge, and what we're going to look at, is drum roll. I'll put this in the post, or not, and just make myself look embarrassing. Collab poetry. Ooh. So this can be taken in a few different ways. We're going to talk about some approaches that one might take. We'll talk about what we're gonna do, and we'll first go over to Dr. Ailes in her cupboard of knowing poetry good, to help us understand a little more. Katie, what the fuck am I talking about when I'm saying collab poetry?
I have no idea, Bex. But what I think when I think about collab poetry, I think, especially compared to like page poetry last week, where we talked around it a lot, I think collab is quite simple. It's a poem that is composed and performed by more than one person. You can have collab poetry that's written by one person and performed by a lot of people, but I think for us in this challenge, we're going to try to create it collaboratively, as well as having the final product be something that is performed collaboratively. So there are so many examples of this. I know we're going to be sharing a few of them, but you can have 2-person poems, you can have 10-person poems, you know, however many you want. Sometimes collaborative work is between a poet and a musician. We do that a lot at our shows. We often have our loud musician on stage with us. You can do, all sorts of collaborations with artists and various other things. So yeah, as long as it's not just one entity creating it, it is, and performing it, it is collaborative.
Step 1, find someone to write with.
Step 1, make a pal.
If you are interested in finding someone to write with, then why not join our Patreon writing club? We have a whole bunch of great members. Y'all who are listening are dope. We love you so much. And hopefully we have our NaPoWriMo thread. If you're interested in finding someone to write with in a collaborative way, hopefully we can maybe hook you up with someone. Again, not that way. I really make everything sound a little less innocent than I intend. But hopefully we can introduce some people. Maybe so we can get a little chat going and see what might spike your interest in terms of writing with someone collaboratively. So yeah.
Comment below to make friends.
Yeah. So we're going to split it up and do a collab poem. So Katie and Kev, you are.
Oh, I don't like spending time with him.
Well, you should. I don't know what to tell you. You should live
I've got
together.
Katie. Yes, poem done.
Well, it's gonna be about Helen.
You cannot.
We're there.
You cannot resubmit the your canto catcher because Katie wrote it. That's not. That doesn't count.
That doesn't count.
Get ready for vegetarian love, people. It's coming your way.
Amazing. And then Mark and I, we will also be Team Nightmares. We are also going to be sharing, collaborating in a piece. I actually have collaborated on some poetry before, and I did as part of Return to Form. I worked with Kate Took and Imogen Sterling, and we wrote a Renga, which is a great collaborative form. Obviously the workshop and everything is linked below, and we took an approach of just for getting started, if this is the first time in writing collaboratively. How we approached it was that we came together to discuss what we were looking for, came up with similar themes and an overarching idea, and then went about separately to start contributing to each line of our Renga or each section of the Renga that we were doing. And we could comment on the other person's lines if we had suggestions, but try and avoid changing other people's work. That's kind of fucking rude. And that's part of the collaborative process, is maybe they're going to have ideas that you didn't have that are going to improve your work. Maybe you will think of something that was going to change theirs. Maybe there's like a slicker rhyme or a cool like structural thing that can help. So yeah, basically two sets of eyes are better than one when it comes to writing something and drafting something. That's why editing is so important. So we hope that I hope that that's like a good little tip. I know, Kev, you've written like a bunch of, we've all, the four of us have written collaboratively as well.
And it was a spooky one, I will point out.
I've done a lot
in a sort of, in a bit of a different fashion. So a lot of the collaborative stuff I wrote wasn't separate at all. Like there'd be no ability to define who wrote what line or whatever. It was done kind of more like a writing table kind of, pitching ideas, refining the process. And I've always found that very beneficial. With similar principles, right? Like, if you throw out a line and someone expands on it, improves it, changes it, then like you need to roll with that line. It's a new version, it's a different thing. When you look at like, if you want good tips, I would look at like a lot of how like sketch writers write. You'll find a million interviews on how like the Pythons, Monty Python gang wrote and stuff like that. They're all very helpful. Yeah, it's a weird beast collaborative. You kind of have to work with it's like improv or anything where you have to kind of get a rapport with that person, figure out the best way to match both your styles, what you both want to bring to the table, find that middle ground, and then kind of pursue that. Some people, I work very well, like I like to bounce ideas back and forth, like vocally, rather than like writing down stuff and trading it back and forth. I like to like chop and change. that doesn't work for everyone. So it's just kind of about finding what you're after, picking your tone as well, having a clear idea of like, is this going to be a funny piece, a spooky piece, a kind of like, you know, what's the idea here? Do we want to do combo lines? Do we want to do, you know, two separate sides of a narrative? Whatever that is, find as much as you can structurally before you start laying the kind of, you know, the more the intricate bits of lines and stuff like that, for example. If that's helpful. I don't know. A lot of my early collaborative pieces are just shouting. So, you know.
But
That is
very
entertaining
good shouting.
Yeah.
I mean, things we did, I think it lends itself to comedic. I think it either lends itself to like dual narrative where there is contrasting or complementary narrative, or it leans itself to like comedic skits very well, where you have you know, that, because I think sometimes having that joint line creates the beat laughter, right? One time, two time, third time together, like it's you know, very like rule of three, and so you use very well for that. One thing I did that I very much enjoyed was we had a poem that was like a Dungeons and Dragons poem, where we had like a kind of spanning narrative. We would get a volunteer up on stage, as myself and the wonderful Douglas Gallie, a tremendous poet. And we did a poem where it was, we would have a volunteer on stage and we would do the first sort of stanza. And then depending on how their dice roll went, they would succeed or fail, and it would change the narrative, and the stanzas would sort of go that way. And that was like a weird sprawling mind map of a poem, but when it worked on stage, it was beautiful. So
back to
loads
puzzles.
of options.
Yeah.
And especially on something like that where it would be so hard to learn that by yourself. But like if I know, okay, I'm taking all the fail poems and you're taking all the success poems, then like you know your own piece of it, and you kind of go on like that. So it leans very well to those kind of maybe something more intricate, more abstract, more kind of playful, where a second voice can help kind of take some of the narrative weight off an individual.
Well, we will be back on the 9th of April, sharing our collaboratively written poems, or our collab poems, during episode 3 of NaPoWriMo. I was just about to do the plugs, but Kev?
Just because it's one thing that, because it'll come up for us, we will have to record those separately. Don't try and do a multi-voice poem over Discord, because you will not be in sync.
It's going to be some
or
lag
Zoom or
issues.
whatever.
So we will, but we'll explain further at the start of the next episode. But
So,
good point. Good to point out. That is a mental note for the Mark. We got to get together. Anyway. Join us next week to figure out how we're going to do all of that on the 9th of April. We'll be sharing our collab poems, setting new challenges, discussing stuff in general, and just seeing how mad we have gone through this NaPoWriMo journey so far this year. On the 10th of April, you can find us at the Kilderkin in Edinburgh for our brand new twice a month open mic. So thank you everyone who has come to our previous open mics over the last 13 months. Because they are so popular and so many people wanted to come and read, we wanted to facilitate that, and the best way we can do that is with more open mics. So the lovely Nassim Rebecca Asal is going to be our feature of this lovely open mic. Sign-ups are open until the 3rd of April, tomorrow. So jump on if you want to sign up, or just come on down and see some poetry. If you're looking for a collab partner, I mean, it'll be past collab week, but that's still fine. You can find a collab partner later and write a collab poem in your own time. And then also week after next, you can join our writing club, as I've mentioned, on our Patreon. Our the next writing club will be taking place on the 12th of April, up on our Discord. All the details for that is included below. And then we will be at the Scottish Storytelling Centre on the 14th of April for our most excellent, most amazing, super fun, exciting showcase. That's going to kick off at 7:30. Tickets are available, but we have been selling out, so get yours quickly if you're interested in coming. And there's still a last couple of days if you are a Dundee or close by resident and wish to compete in the Loud Poets 2023 season. You can take part in our East Regional Heat, win £200, earn your right to qualify for our grand final with the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and walk away with a whopping £3,000 cash prize. Oh my God, what the hell? That's a lot of money for both. That's a lot of money for both.
That's so much money.
More details on our live season can be found, and everything that we discuss can be found on our website at IAmLoud, and also included down below in our description. But to finish off our collab week, and as we say goodbye to you, I wanted to share this great collaboration between the Reverend Dr. Katie Ailes, and the wonderful Mr. Jack Hinks, our Loud Poets resident
Jack
musician,
Hinks.
with their collaboration and their video of their poem Calluses, which is one of my faves. So we hope you enjoy, and we will catch you next week.
Boy.
Pew, 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 pew.
Growing up, my childhood was tuned to the twang of my dad's guitar. Each afternoon, he'd play to the grand stage of our living room, running the daily scales up and down the walls of our small house again and again, like painting a bass coat. In the whirling kaleidoscope of childhood, it was a rhythm to anchor to, a constant 4/4, familiar and warm. He introduced me to the classics, Dylan, Baez, and always old Mr. Bojangles, and I'd dance, trying to click my heels just like the song said. I'd steal his picks and squirrel them away in my room, a crazy groupie worshipping him like some domestic Bon Jovi in worn-out shoes. One day, he gave me his tuning fork and let me run around the house banging it against any surface I thought needed sounding. I loved its buzz. His fingertips were always so rough, the skin toughened from decades of strumming. Touching them made me gasp, like he had mystical lizard skin, like the music made him magic, and I knew I wanted the spell to catch. As I grew older, I'd beg him to teach me how to play just like him, so patiently, he'd set me the homework of A, C, and G. Just those 3 chords, he said, again and again until the music could root in my fingers, the sound made into muscle. But I never could sit still long enough to plant it there. I'd get bored too quick. I wanted instant talent more than the chore of picking out chords each day. I thought I could just vault on stage, ready-made for soaking in praise, my teenage ego throbbing to the applause. But I soon learned it wasn't magic that had toughened my dad's hands. Before too long, I'd let too many sessions slip for calluses to ever bloom on my fingertips. I've still never learned to play. My dad was born into a blue collar. Working from the age of 15, he trained himself to rise at 5 each day to work double shifts on minimum wage, so dreams of being a full-time artist were never really in the cards. He's never graced major stages. He's never even played outside our home, but fame was never the point for him. He preferred the slow constancy of A, C, and G, of learning the basics, then building on those small victories, finding pleasure in practice. He mastered the craft of fitting art in the cracks between real-life obligations, his job, his family. He always made time to tune. And really, music wasn't some flashy distraction, but the glue holding it all together. For my family, those evening melodies were a steady beat in a discordant world. And maybe most wouldn't call my dad an artist. Sure, he's never toured or been paid to play, but he taught me never to wait for someone else to give you that name to be creative. Last winter, my dad retired. After 50 years in the workforce, he's finally free to sleep in, breathe easy, do nothing if he pleases. But he's still rises at 5 each day and starts tuning that guitar. He's taken up bluegrass lessons on Tuesdays, practices all week. I love that after 50 years twanging the tongue of the same instrument, he can still find joy in its voice, draw new sounds from its mouth. I suppose it's because he knows the language so well, has slowly molded its vocabulary into his hands. I hope I too can find the patience to build the alphabet into my teeth before I try to speak too fast. Last time I was home, I told him, someday we should write something together. Not yet though. Right now, we're both still learning.